Hello, I'm Mike and welcome to the workshop. And this week it is so cold in Ireland. Yeah, it has been -2 to 6 all week. So let's start making some stuff and warm up. Now, if you watched my videos before, you will have seen this guy, my shoulder jig. And it's getting a little bit worn out. It's one of those things I made really quickly when I needed one, and I've been using it for years. So it's time to upgrade it. I want to add stiffness to it. I want to remove the screws as the means of tightening down. I want to put a machine screw in there, which will give me the advantage of more mechanical strength, and also I can eventually put in much longer screws to use thicker materials. So let's go down to the bench. We'll start talking about what we're going to do. Let's get at it. So in this design that I'm using, and other people have their own designs, I have several basic parts, and I'm going to be using this naming convention as we make, so I'm going to introduce you to them. So this part here is my fence, and for the fence to be effective it needs to be in a hardwood so it doesn't wear away, but of course we can always true this. And this line at the front of the fence needs to be completely flat, completely straight, and the angle down the fence from this bottom face needs to be exactly 90. And that guarantees then that when I put a piece in here with a bank of dovetails or with a shoulder or a tenon, and I follow it with my chisel, that by holding it tight against this face I'll be able to cut completely down and completely straight. And then obviously I need a base, a deck, I'll call this the deck, and in between the deck and the piece that I clamp in here I put in a little sacrificial piece, because you can see here, I take off my fence, you can see under my fence where I've used this, and I've used it all along the length, and now we're getting this little ridge. The problem with that ridge is that if you don't have a supporting piece under your work, when you push through you're going to blow out the front. So I generally will put a piece of thin plywood in there so that when I put my piece on top of it and clamp down my fence, I always have a fresh line. Basically just keep pushing that piece of plywood, always have it there, so I'm always working off a fresh edge. So the next thing then, under this I have my deck, which is the base of this. The main purpose of this was is to raise it enough off the table that I can put a fixing in so I can clamp down my fence. And this piece here, which allows me then to, see if that's in shot, that piece there, the catcher, which allows me to clamp it securely in my vise so it's sitting flat on my bench and held in place. So the first thing I'm going to upgrade here is I'm going to change these two pieces of ply for one solid piece of ply. And I have this really nice piece of birch ply. I'm going to use that for it, or a portion thereof. So birch ply is much denser, it's going to be a lot firmer when I'm working on it, and it'll look a bit nicer once I have the ickiness gone off it. And instead of these screws, which obviously will wear out eventually, I'm going to use stud bolts and a nut. This also removes the need for having my drill every time I want to use this jig. So I'm going to get started by cutting my deck piece. So initially here I had a much larger size in mind, and ultimately I ended up cutting this to be around 300 square. That'll do most of the work I'm doing. My idea being that if in the future I need to make bigger banks of dovetails and stuff, I'll be able to, for those single uses, make up a similar jig. So I just cut my piece the size here is going to be my deck, and then quickly cut my two under supports as well. So it was in around this point that my camera decided to stop filming, but I do realise in a second and go back and explain the steps that have been missed. But essentially here all I'm doing is gluing my deck to the two pieces that are going to be my base. and I put in just a few screws in places where I can't possibly hit them to fix it, and then we move on to the next step, which is finding that nice piece of hardwood to make our fence. So, got my glue up done here. I'm just going to explain because it got cut off in the last clip. So I put a row of holes in my top here to attach my deck to my base. I've kept these out wide and very clear, even though the material is quite thick. The reason being is I don't want there ever to be a chance that, let's say, I pull out a piece and I'm working on it here because this is a nice area to fettle joints as well. I don't want to miss going to a screw. So keeping them out to the edge, even though the piece is wider, and I'm gluing it in place so we don't get that flex. And that's the great thing about birch ply. There's no flex in the birch ply, so I won't get what I was getting in my previous one, where as I pushed down to cut the joint, it was deflecting, which means there was a gap developing between my sacrificial piece and my real top, and it was causing blowout. So I'm just going to throw a couple of regular 4x40 screws into this, and you're actually just screwing it as well as this is quick because I want to get back to work. There's loads of projects still to do, even though the year is getting towards the end. So just line everything up, throw in our few screws. And do a quick smash cut. That's screwed. I'll throw a couple of clamps just to make sure it's tight on the inside, and now let's hunt for our fence material. So behind me here I have my big stack of offcuts, so I'm going to hunt and see if I can find a nice piece of hardwood that I can get perfectly square to make my fence. That'll do, pig. That'll do. Alright, so I pretty much recently found this nice piece of X-inch oak, and it's important that it's nice and dense. Like, it has to be a hardwood, if that makes sense, because it's rubbing motion. We don't want that to change the angle. The idea of this is to make our jobs easier, so that we know when we push a chisel through there, we're going to get a 90-degree cut. So the first thing I need to do here is I'm going to cut this down to the length of my base, and then I'm going to machine all four sides with my plane to get everything perfectly square. Hand screwing isn't something I've really covered on the channel before, but I'm going to now. Now, of course, like, you can get pre-planed hardwoods, like, and if you have anyone nearby, like a joiner or something like that, they're going to have scraps that's already squared. You can remove this step, but it's an important skill to learn. So I'm just going to show you how I do it. Probably not the exact right way to do it, but I get good results. So bring it down to the table and let's start doing that. So when I built this bench, I built it with this end stop for pretty much so this exact situation. I'll finally get to use it. So the idea here, what we're going to do, obviously this is already planed on one side, but we'll ignore that. We'll pick the rougher of the two faces. So we're going to pick a face that we're going to make our face edge. I'm going to come along with my scrub plane. This is a number 4.5. And I'm going to work that face down using the scrub plane until we work roughly all the humps and the hollows out of it. We're checking it with our ruler to see that we're pretty much so there. in both directions. I still have a little bit of a hump here, so I'll put a few passes down the middle. And I want to get it 90% there. That'll do for the moment. And then I'll come along with my much wider, longer plane. And I go on plane with the idea of getting a full width, full length shaving. And that will mean that that face should be perfectly flat and perfectly straight along. So with this, patience is the key. Don't get too hepped up and make sure you're not angling too much out. So once we're getting that full width shaving and it's flat across, we know this face will be flat, that this takes a little bit more work. So, bar the tiniest little bit there now. I'm getting a full width shaving. I have no rocking along this, and that means that that face is flat. So we're going to call that our face edge, and we're going to go around, square up this face and this edge, then this edge to this face, and then that edge to that face, and that way ideally we will come with a perfectly square piece of material. Now when planing like this, and I've mentioned it before, but I'll just go through it again. The two main tips with this kind of work would be patience, patience, patience. And secondly, wood has a grain. Now, I'm exaggerating it here in this drawing. But when you're planing, what you want to do is come from this direction. So you're cutting the tops off the grain. Because if you come from this direction, you're actually going to start grabbing and pulling up the grain. So I'm going to put this in my vise. I'm going to square up this face, do the other two, and I'll come back to you when it's all ready. Right, so after much work, just taking the last few bumps off there, we have it all nice and square. Next step then, is it's time to drill the holes for our adjustment system. And we're nearly done. It's that quick of a project.
I should point out, this is hard work, but I was very sick whilst filming this, so that's why I'm so much out of breath.
So, I'm going to set the lens back about 30 mil. Doesn't really matter because we'll be adjusting the piece we put in. It's nice to have a square. So we'll just mark it there, cover the screws. And then just put a line on it. We'll come in 1 inch on either end, 25 mil. And put a screw hole dead center. So I want to drill a hole in these that's bigger than the metal shank. This is an M8, so that's around an 8 mil shank. So I get a 9 mil drill bit here. That should give me a little bit of freedom to bring it up and down. And I'll show you a little trick then for marking corresponding holes on our top. Now to put through, we'll just line that back up on the line. Just cut off any of the scraggly bits. And even though I have this squared, I do have my face side and face edges. I want to make sure that that side goes down. It means then that in time to come, I can swap them over if I need to, or if I need to put an angled side on it, I know that I have a square edge there. So we'll line up with the side that I want to use, like that. And we simply take the drill bit here that we used drilling these, make sure it's lined up perfectly. Give it a little tap, and that should give us a point here that will be the perfect center point for our stud bolt. So our stud bolt won't go the whole way through, but I'll drill a hole almost the whole way through. And with these, you want to get a drill bit that's just bigger than the inside. So I'm going to get a 6.5, 6.1. I'm going to have here. So we'll put down our finish piece again and drill our holes through. Now, if you happen to be buying these, I'd recommend you get the type with a little star head in the top. That's probably not going to show, but it makes driving them a lot easier. You can drive them with a little shank here, but the star head makes driving them a hell of a lot easier. You watch how quickly that happens now. Now, to test will it fit. I really should have checked this before I did it. We'll see. Perfect. I'm just going to put on 2 wide washers here to help me clamp down. Adjust it up much quicker. Now, of course, in time to come, because I drilled the hole so deep, if I was going through thicker material than I'm able to handle here, I could swap these out for full length bolts. So tighten this down, then I simply just get my ratchet. Quicker and gives a better grip on the screws. Like, right now I could start working on that, and that's not going to shift. Excellent. So the very last thing to do then is to put on our clamp. Sorry, our piece here at the bottom, and that's very simple. That'll take 10 seconds. So, that's it. That's this week's video done. Nothing else is going to happen. It's finished. You know me too well. It's Danish all the time.
So, this time, besides my unnatural predisposition towards using Danish oil, there is a reasoning behind it. I like using oil-based finishes for jigs like this because compared to a lacquer or certain finish, it actually gives a more slick finish, which allows pieces to slide in and slide out, and that's particularly important on the fence here because we don't want friction between the blade and this fence, And before I use it as well, I will always give it a rub of just some beeswax. That helps me guide chisel up and down, and helps keep it nice and accurate. So yeah, this was a fun project, and it literally took me an evening. It'd probably only take you about 2 hours if you weren't talking your way through it. And now all that's left is some glory shots and showing it working. As always, thank you for staying to the end of the video. Like, share, subscribe and all that fun stuff. And absolutely do try this at home.